doesn't happen, but that's my position. And it's not a position I've always held. Okay, man is created in God's image, that man is a special creation of God, in the image of God. So the likeness of God, and the Latin term imagio Deo, image of God. And the secular viewpoint then is man is the same as all else that's living. That man isn't a special creation, that man is no different than animals, plants, and has no special preference to be given to man over those other living things. And so man is made in the image of goo, because out of goo we were supposedly evolved. So we'll just term that imagio goo. So man is God's special creation versus man is no different than any other animal. So what does that lead to? When man is God's special creation, and he teaches us that we can't take man's life except in the situation where man has taken somebody else's life, that leads to the position of right to life, that we all have that right to life. Declaration of Independence talked about that. That was one of the rights that we had, unalienable rights, was the right to life. The other position then, secular position, if man has no special uniqueness, or man wasn't created in the image of God, that man is just like any other animal or a plant, then that leads to abortion being okay, because it doesn't matter. Man isn't special, and if babies are aborted, they don't call them babies being aborted, but I've never seen anything else come forth other than a baby. Also, euthanasia. If man isn't created in the image of God, then euthanasia is okay. Also leads to things like the Holocaust, where the German leaders decided that the Jewish people were a lower form of life. They weren't created in the image of God. They were a lower form of life, and they needed to be eradicated. That's the kind of thinking that comes out of the secular worldview. The other position there is survival of the fittest, which fits right in with the Holocaust, because the fittest ones were destroying the weaker ones. So you got two stark contrasts here between a biblical worldview that recognizes man as a special creation of God versus the other one where man evolved from nothing and is no different than any other living being. Okay, biblical perspective is that man has a fallen nature. That when Adam sinned, then we all sinned in Adam, and that we have a fallen nature. Secular worldview is that man is inherently good, that we're born that way, and that we are inherently good people. Now, it leads to some interesting questions that are difficult to answer. We'll get to that in just a second, but the fallen nature leads to the depravity of man. That if you have a choice of being, man does a lot of horrible things. And we see that in the newspapers every day. We read about the things that have happened in history. One of the things about the secular point of view or worldview is that man needs to self-actualize to reach his potential, to do the things that he wants to do for himself. And that is the ultimate for man. Now, that leads to some issues as well. Man is in need of redemption because man is fallen, man is a depraved creature, and is in need of redemption. Now, if man is inherently good, where does evil come from? Good question. And some of the positions that have been put forth are that they come from social institutions. Well, who makes up social institutions? Man. And in particular, the social institution that needs to be eradicated is the church. Because the church is the group that somehow brings that evil into being. Biblical perspective is that man is a dualistic creature, that we're a physical creature, but we're also a spiritual creature. The secular view is that just monistic, that you just have a physical life, and that is it. Biblical perspective is that there are absolute rights and wrongs. Our country was founded on that principle, that there was right and wrong, and that right and wrong was defined by what God's Word said. Secular viewpoint, which was not very well, or wasn't around much at that time, is that everything is relative and that there are no absolutes. So what does that lead to? Leads to a phone ringing. It leads to, if there's absolute right and wrong, and God has established what that is, then we are accountable to God in the fact, and also the fact that we are created by Him. That's our perspective. We recognize that we are accountable to Him. However, if there is no God, and there is no right and wrong, we become accountable to ourselves. And whatever we want to do, we can justify to ourselves that that's okay to do. So again, those two different perspectives there. When we're accountable to God, God has ordained that there is a government for certain purposes and limited purposes, but we're primarily accountable to God. And we'll have a slide that demonstrates that here in just a minute. The other secular perspective is that the ends justify the means. So if I want to get you to do something that you may not want to do, it's okay for me to lie to you as long as what I got you to do is for the greater good or some other reason to justify that. So the ends justify the means. And in politics, I mean, we have a president right now who doesn't seem to have any issue with lying to us about anything and to be able to accomplish his purposes. Obamacare being one of those things, you know, if you like your doctor, you get to keep him. If you like your health insurance, you get to keep it until Obamacare actually starts. And it also leads to big government because then you have a need for widespread control because you're no longer accountable to God, you're accountable to yourself, and you can do anything you want then, and you have to have more control from government. And Benjamin Franklin is a quote from him, "As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters." Okay, this is what I was referring to, where we have God at the top, and man has that relationship, accountable relationship with God. So God, and that results in an internal self-governance on what is right and wrong based upon